The room went silent when Evelyn Marsh pointed at Wesley Kane and said, "You're done, not privately. Not respectfully." In front of executives, dock workers, and a live-stream camera, she stripped a hard-working single dad of his dignity with one cold sentence. Wesley didn't shout. He didn't beg. He simply set down his clipboard, looked her in the eye, and walked out like a man who quietly knew something she didn't. 10 months later, by April, Halverson Logistics was bleeding contracts. Her board was furious, and the only person who could save her was the man she had thrown away. It was a Friday in June. The all-hands quarterly meeting filled the cavernous main bay of the North Charleston warehouse, fluorescent lights humming above 200 folding chairs. Garrett Whitlock stood at Evelyn's left, a red-tabbed folder pressed to his chest. The internal livestream blinked on, broadcasting to 340 employees scattered across Savannah, Jacksonville, and Wilmington. Garrett took the microphone first. He spoke in the measured cadence he had perfected over 22 years at Halverson, the cadence that made dismissals sound like architecture. He called it operational restructuring. He named names. Wesley Kane, he said, was not aligned with the new leadership culture. Wesley Kane, he said, lacked the upper-tier communication skills the company now required. Evelyn read from the script Garrett had handed her that morning. She did not look down at the fourth row, where Wesley stood in his Navy maintenance shirt, clipboard tucked under one arm. She did not look at the men he had worked beside for 30 months. She looked at the back wall and read the words in her flat boardroom voice. Wesley raised his hand. He did not wait to be called on. His voice came out steady, almost gentle, carrying across the concrete floor without effort. "Is this because I flagged the irregularities on Route 42? Evelyn's chin lifted half an inch. She did not understand the question. She heard a maintenance worker stepping into her script, and that was enough. "You're done," she said. The room held its breath. 200 faces turned in the same direction, slowly. Wesley set the clipboard on the chair beside him. He folded his work shirt at the cuffs, slow, almost ceremonial. He nodded to the two foremen in the second row who had taught him how to read the gantry crane manuals 3 winters ago. He walked the aisle, unhurried, the way a man walks when he has nowhere left to prove anything. When he passed Evelyn, the distance between them was the length of a single stride. He stopped. He spoke too low for the microphone, but the camera caught the shape of the words on his mouth. "I hope you read your own log someday." Then he was through the door. By 8 that night, the 47-second clip of Wesley walking out had been forwarded across internal channels more than 800 times. Della Yoon, the chief compliance officer, watched it once from her desk on the 14th floor of the downtown tower. Then she closed her laptop. Her hands were shaking. Wesley pulled into the Citgo on Coleman Boulevard on his way home. He sat with the engine off and dialed his son. "Hey, buddy. Dad's coming home early. How about pancakes?" Felix said yes the way 8-year-olds say yes, with the whole word. Wesley hung up. He sat there for 10 minutes before he turned the key, watching the heat shimmer rise off the asphalt of the empty pump island. On the passenger seat lay the severance check, $4,200 folded into the white envelope HR had handed him at the warehouse exit without making eye contact. He folded the envelope in quarters. He pushed it into the glove box on top of the registration. Then he drove across the Ravenel Bridge toward Mount Pleasant, where the porch light was already on. 3 days later, Della knocked on the open door of Evelyn's office at 12:15. She carried a thin manila folder and a question that sounded like nothing at all. "Did you know who Wesley Kane was before he came to Halverson?" Evelyn frowned at her screen. "Maintenance supervisor. 2.5 years here." Della laid the folder on the desk and slid it forward. Inside was a photocopy of United States Patent Number 9843217, filed in 2018, granted in 2020. Orion Container Routing System. Lead inventor: Wesley A. Kane, Senior Systems Architect, Beacon Maritime Industries. Halverson licensed Orion from Beacon in 2021, Della said. $14 million. Every container we move out of Charleston, Savannah, and Jacksonville runs on this system. Garrett signed the licensing agreement himself. Wesley applied for the maintenance posting 2 years later under his full legal name. No one in leadership cross-checked. Evelyn went very still. She picked up the patent printout and read the abstract twice. The technical language was hers to comprehend in pieces, but the name at the top was not in pieces. It was in 14-point bold. Why, Evelyn said, would a man with that resume take a maintenance job at $24 an hour? Della sat down without being invited. His wife died in 2021, pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. He resigned from Beacon 3 weeks later. He has a son, Felix, 8 years old. Maintenance doesn't have evening calls. He took the position because it was the only one in the city that let him be home before 6 every night. Evelyn opened her routing audit terminal. She typed Wesley's employee number. The system surfaced 3 incident reports filed under his name in the past 6 months. Each report flagged statistical irregularities on Route 42, the Charleston to Jacksonville container corridor. Each had been closed within 48 hours by Garrett Whitlock with the same notation, verified false positive. No further action required. She called Garrett to her office. He came at a stroll. He wore the same calm he had worn the morning of the firing. He sat in the leather chair across from her desk and waited. He flagged Route 42 3 times. You closed all 3. Maintenance is not authorized to read routing logs, Garrett said. He exceeded his clearance. That was the actual basis for termination. Beyond that, Evelyn, do you really believe a senior systems architect takes a wrench job out of grief? He had an agenda. He was likely consulting for a competitor on the side. She nodded slowly. She did not entirely believe him. She also did not entirely disbelieve him. Garrett left. Evelyn opened her email archive and searched the board minutes from April. There it was, in his own typed bullet point. Recommendation. Identify and remove operational risks inherited from the prior Beacon acquisition. She had signed the approval that day without reading past the cover memo. That evening she stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her apartment on East Bay Street, watching the harbor lights blink red on the container cranes. She thought about calling Wesley. She thought about the look on his face in the aisle. She did not call. She told herself the system was running. She told herself Garrett had explained it. She told herself she did not need a maintenance worker to teach her how to run her grandfather's company. She turned off the lamp. She went to bed. On her desk, the manila folder Della had left sat untouched. It would sit untouched for the next 10 months. April. 10 months after the firing. Halverson Logistics had lost 7 major contracts in a row. Carolina Coastal Distributors, valued at $48 million a year, had moved their entire shipping volume to Meridian Freight in October. Lowcountry Shipping had withdrawn in December. Atlantic Pier Holdings had followed in February. The internal book valuation of Halverson's stock had fallen 47%. In Savannah, Beacon Maritime had risen from the dead. 3 of the 7 contracts Halverson lost had landed in Beacon's lap. The Charleston Business Journal ran a front-page piece titled "The Beacon Comeback Nobody Saw Coming." Industry analysts could not explain how a company that had been bleeding talent for 3 years was suddenly routing containers 21% faster than Halverson on the same trade lanes. Friday morning, an emergency board meeting convened on the 14th floor. Carl Halverson, 78 years old, the founder's son and Evelyn's grandfather, sat at the head of the walnut conference table. He had not chaired a meeting in 8 years. He tapped his index finger on the wood, slowly, twice. Evelyn. You have 30 days to bring this board a recovery plan. If you do not, we will hold a vote on the chief executive position. She did not argue. She nodded once. She returned to her office and called every senior vice president into the conference room across the hall. Garrett sat opposite her, calm as winter water. This is a market cycle. I recommend a 40% reduction in operational headcount, including the entire compliance department. Evelyn's eyes went to Della. Della had not spoken once. She was watching Garrett the way a person watches a snake she has finally identified. After the meeting broke, Della followed Evelyn into her office and shut the door. Do you remember the folder I left on your desk 10 months ago? Evelyn said nothing. I have stayed in contact with Wesley Kane for 10 months. He has been consulting for Beacon out of his garage in Mount Pleasant. Not as an employee. No fixed salary. No press release. Project-based revenue share, paid in monthly installments through a small holding company he set up the week after his firing. That is why Beacon suddenly knows our routing patterns better than we do. He built the system. He still reads its breath. Evelyn felt something cold travel her spine. He's taking revenge. Della shook her head. He's working. There's a difference. He hasn't come back to Halverson because he doesn't need to. Beacon has offered him the chief architect chair 3 times in 10 months. He's turned it down all 3. For personal reasons. Not because of you. He still leaves work at 4 to pick up his son. Della pulled out her phone. I'm driving to his house tonight. Do you want me to bring a message? Evelyn sat very still for a full minute. Tell him I need to talk. Not about the company. About something I didn't read carefully 10 months ago. That evening Della drove east across the Ravenel. Wesley was at the kitchen table with Felix, folding a paper dragon out of yellow legal paper. The porch light flicked on as her tires hit the gravel. She knocked. Wesley opened the door without surprise, as if he had been counting the months himself. Are you here for her, or for you? Both. But I also need you. I'm filing my resignation next week, and I don't want to leave with Garrett still winning. Wesley let her into the kitchen. The house smelled like garlic and toast. Felix looked up from his chair and tilted his head, then slid out and walked over with the paper dragon held in both palms. He did not say hello. He simply held it up to her. For me? Della asked. He nodded. He had his father's economy of words. Della took the dragon carefully, one finger under each wing. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Her own son was 29 and lived in Portland and had not handed her anything in a decade. Felix went back upstairs. Wesley poured coffee. Della sat at the maple table Hannah had picked out at the antique market on King Street 10 years ago. She told him everything. The 7 contracts gone since October. Garrett's proposal that morning to gut compliance and shave 40% of the operational team. Carl Halverson's 30-day clock. Evelyn's silence in her own boardroom while a man she trusted laid out a plan that would bury a third of the company. She did not ask Wesley to come back. She did not even use the word forgiveness. She kept her hands flat on the table and let the facts do the work. I'm leaving Halverson regardless. But before I do, I want you to have the chance to hear her out. Once. You have every right to say no, and I will respect it. Wesley stirred his coffee slowly. Have you kept the emails Garrett sent to Meridian? Backed up since last year. 2 copies, one with a personal attorney, one in a safe at home. Then you don't need me to expose Garrett. You can do it yourself. Della was quiet for a long beat. I know. But if I do it alone, the board will see a compliance officer who's bitter about being fired. They'll need an engineer beside me. The man who designed the system being misused. You're the only one who can be that man. Wesley looked through the kitchen window. Felix was visible in the living room, drawing something with a green crayon. I don't need Halverson anymore, Della. Beacon pays me enough. Felix has dinner every night. I have nothing left to prove. I'm not asking you to prove anything, I'm asking you to help me do the right thing. Because I stayed quiet 2 years before he fired you. I could have stopped it. I didn't. Wesley set the spoon down. For the first time since she had walked in, he looked at her directly. I'll meet her. Once. Here, not at the office. Monday, 7 o'clock, after Felix is asleep. And I'll have conditions. Della nodded. She did not ask what they were. She rose and gathered her coat. She left with the paper dragon zipped into the inside pocket. After she pulled out of the driveway, Wesley climbed the stairs and sat on the edge of Felix's bed. The boy was reading his dinosaur book under the lamp. Dad might be busier the next few weeks. An old thing that needs handling. Felix did not look up. Is it about the lady with brown hair in the old clip? Wesley went still. I saw it on Marcus's iPad. She wasn't nice to you. But I think she's sorry now. Wesley did not speak. He sat in the half-light of the dinosaur lamp for a long time. Then he turned off the light and stayed there, listening to the boy breathe. Monday at 7 o'clock, Evelyn drove east across the bridge. She wore jeans and a gray cardigan and no makeup. She parked 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way on the cracked sidewalk, past the magnolia trees in early bloom. Wesley opened the door before she knocked. He did not invite her inside. He gestured to the front porch, where 2 black mugs of coffee sat steaming on a cedar side table. Felix was already asleep. She sat. She did not apologize first. She knew apology was the cheapest currency in the room. I didn't read the folder Della left on my desk 10 months ago. I've read it now. I've read it 3 times. Wesley did not react. He said only, so you know what Garrett is doing. I know now. I need you to help me prove it to the board. I'm not asking you to come back to Halverson long term. I'm asking you to stand beside Della at the end of month meeting. Wesley took a slow sip. The rocker beside him creaked once in the breeze. I'll do it. But I have 3 conditions. She waited. 1. I don't return as an employee, I come in as an independent forensic consultant. 3-month contract. Either side can terminate at any time, no penalty. She nodded. 2. Della is not cut, she is promoted to Chief Compliance Officer with a direct reporting line to the board, not to the CEO. This condition is not negotiable. She nodded again. 3. He stopped. He turned to look at her, for the first time that night. After this is over, regardless of how it ends, you stand at the next quarterly all hands. The same warehouse. The same live stream. The same camera that broadcast my firing. And you read a public statement saying you were wrong. Evelyn swallowed. You want me to humiliate myself in front of 200 people. I don't want anything. I'm setting conditions. You can refuse, the meeting ends here. She was quiet for a long minute. She thought about Carl's finger tapping on the walnut table. She thought about the board, the federal court motion her lawyers were already drafting, the empty chair that would sit at the end of the conference room next month if she said no. She thought about Garrett's voice, the cadence she had once mistaken for competence, still echoing through the executive floor every morning at 8. I agree to all 3. Wesley nodded once. He stood and opened the screen door. Before he went inside, he paused. I'll be at your office Wednesday at 8. Bring the unfiltered Orion logs from the past 6 months, full administrative access. Don't let Garrett know I'm coming. If he sees me on the security feed before I'm in your office, he will burn the trail before noon. She drove west across the bridge in silence. When she stopped at the red light at the foot of the Ravenel, she noticed her hands on the steering wheel were trembling. Not from fear of Garrett. For the first time in 8 years of running the company, she had agreed to do something she did not want to do, and she could feel that it was right. On the passenger seat lay a blank yellow notepad and a sharpened pencil. She had thought she would draft the public statement on the drive home. She did not write a single word that night, or the next. Wednesday, 8 in the morning. Wesley came up the freight elevator and through the back service corridor on the 14th floor. Della had spent 2 days arranging Garrett's calendar through his executive assistant, planting a Meridian Discovery meeting in Atlanta that would keep him on Interstate 20 all day. Wesley sat at the side workstation in Evelyn's office and pulled the Orion audit terminal up on the secondary monitor. He worked for 5 hours without speaking more than a sentence at a time. The pattern revealed itself in the 3rd hour. Route 42 had been manually overridden 23 times in 6 months. Each override had been logged by operator credential GW007, Garrett Whitlock. Each override had occurred between 10 on a Friday night and 3 on a Saturday morning. Each one redirected one high-value container, average declared value $186,000, to a truck with no registered DOT number. Each container vanished from active tracking for 6 hours, then reappeared under a different manifest code, listed as cargo bound for the Meridian Terminal in Jacksonville. Total estimated loss, $4,300,000. Della came in at 1 in the afternoon with a battered USB drive and a brown leather notebook she had kept in a safe deposit box for 2 years. The notebook held printouts of 14 months of email correspondence between Garrett and Trent Halsey, the chief financial officer of Meridian Freight. Side agreements. Payment milestones. A signed memorandum agreeing to compensate Garrett $2,300,000 after Halverson voluntarily exits the Charleston market. An offer letter dated last August naming Garrett as Meridian's chief operating officer effective in March. Della spoke to Evelyn, not Wesley. My husband works at Whitlock Maritime Services. Garrett owns 51%. 2 years ago, he came to my office and told me that if I escalated anything, my husband would be terminated within the week. I chose to stay quiet. When I watched Wesley get fired, I knew I had chosen wrong. I started collecting from that day. Then she handed Wesley a thicker document. The original Orion licensing agreement, signed by Garrett in 2021. Page 47. Wesley turned the pages. He read the clause twice. It was a single paragraph titled Original Architect Protection. If the inventor of record on the licensed system, named explicitly as Wesley A. Kane, ever entered Halverson Logistics in any role, the inventor retained full administrative read access to all audit logs concerning Orion operations. The clause had been inserted by Beacon's outside counsel as a standard designer protection. Garrett had signed it without flagging it. The firing of Wesley Kane had not just been bad judgment. It had been a direct, signed contractual violation. Civilly actionable. Possibly criminally actionable as obstruction. Wesley set the document down. I didn't know Beacon's lawyers had added that. Marcus Halverson at Holcomb and Wright must have put it in to protect designers. Evelyn closed her eyes for one breath. It's enough. Wesley nodded once. He stood and packed his laptop into the worn canvas bag. At the door he stopped. Evelyn had risen and crossed the room. Thank you. Wesley looked at her for a long moment. Don't thank me, thank Della. She kept those emails for 2 years. Somebody had to use them well. He walked out. Evelyn sat down in the chair he had vacated. The leather was still warm. For the first time in 10 months, she did not feel alone in her own office. Friday, 10 in the morning. The boardroom on the 14th floor, 9 members, including Carl Halverson at the head. Garrett Whitlock at the far end in a charcoal vest, briefcase open, 3 pages of recommended termination paperwork for Della Yoon stacked in front of him. He believed this meeting was about cutting compliance. Evelyn did not waste an opening. I'd like to reintroduce Mr. Wesley Kane. Original designer of the Orion container routing system that runs every terminal we operate. Mr. Kane will present the findings of an independent forensic review of operational anomalies over the past 6 months. Wesley rose from the seat to her right. He wore a dark blue button-down shirt, no tie. When he spoke, his voice held the calm precision of a flight recorder transcript. 23 manual overrides in 6 months. Each between 10 p.m. Friday and 3 a.m. Saturday, each routed through credential GW007, total documented loss, $4,300,000. He projected the audit logs onto the screen, line by line, timestamps glowing in green monospace. Garrett interrupted. This is slander. He is a disgruntled former employee currently consulting for Beacon. I demand an independent review. Evelyn placed Della's USB drive on the polished walnut. This is the independent review. 14 months of correspondence between you and the CFO of Meridian Freight. A signed compensation agreement for $2,300,000 contingent on Halverson's exit from the Charleston market. An offer letter naming you as Meridian's chief operating officer. Copies were delivered to Holcomb and Wright at 5 this morning and to the FBI Charleston field office at 6. Della stood and set the brown leather notebook on the table beside the drive. I have held this evidence for 2 years. I was wrong to stay silent. I apologize to this board, to our employees, and to Mr. Kane. Garrett's face went the color of wet paper. He looked around the table searching for an ally. There was none. Carl Halverson, who had not spoken once during the meeting, lifted his head. Garrett. You have sat in the chair to my right for 22 years. I trusted you. I was wrong. Stand up and leave this building. Security will collect your badge at the elevator. Garrett gathered his pages. His hands were not quite steady. At the door he turned and looked at Wesley. You won't last 6 months. She'll throw you out again. Wesley did not answer. The door shut. The board voted 9-0. Immediate termination of Garrett Whitlock for cause. Suspension of all access credentials. Asset freeze pursued through emergency motion in federal court. Carl proposed Wesley as interim chief operations architect. Wesley repeated the conditions he and Evelyn had agreed to on the porch. The vote carried. Della was promoted to chief compliance officer with direct reporting to the board. 9-0. The meeting adjourned. In the hallway outside, the floor was empty except for the hum of the building. Evelyn stood alone by the window, watching the cranes work the harbor 16 floors below. Wesley came out of the boardroom carrying his laptop bag and the leather notebook. He paused beside her. There's still the third condition. He waited. The next quarterly all hands. 2 weeks from today. Same warehouse. Same live stream. I'll read the statement. Wesley nodded once. He walked to the stairwell and disappeared down the steps. That night Evelyn sat at the dining table in her apartment with a single sheet of notepaper and a black ballpoint pen. She wrote. She crossed out. She tore the page in half. She wrote again. By 2 in the morning she had 280 words on a single page. She did not show them to anyone. 2 weeks later. The quarterly all hands at the North Charleston warehouse. The same fluorescent lights. The same 200 folding chairs. The same live stream feed humming green to 340 employees in Savannah, Jacksonville, Wilmington. Wesley stood in the 4th row, in the exact place he had stood 10 months earlier. Felix stood beside him, hand inside his father's hand. Wesley had asked the school for the morning, and the principal had said yes without asking why. Della, in her new role, took the microphone first. She introduced Evelyn. She did not embellish. Evelyn walked to the wooden riser at the front of the bay. She did not carry a folder. She held a single sheet of paper folded into quarters in her left hand. She set it on the lectern. She did not unfold it. 10 months ago, in this same warehouse, I fired a man in front of 200 people and a camera. I read from a script Garrett Whitlock had handed me that morning. I did not ask a single question. I did not read the reports he had filed. I did not check his name in the system of the company I run. She paused. She found Wesley in the 4th row. His name is Wesley Kane. He is the senior systems architect who designed Orion. He is the man who flagged the irregularities on Route 42 3 separate times, irregularities that have since been verified as fraud committed by Garrett Whitlock. He is a father. He worked at Halverson for 30 months at $24 an hour while holding the patent for the software our entire operation runs on every day. She unfolded the page now, but she did not look down at it. I cannot give back those 10 months. I cannot delete the clip that was forwarded 800 times the first week. I can only stand here, on the same riser, in front of the same camera, and say I was wrong. I was wrong about him. I was wrong to trust Garrett without verifying. I was wrong to think that power meant not having to apologize. She refolded the page. Her voice was steady, but it had lost the polish of the boardroom. Wesley Kane. If you'll stand, I would like to apologize to you in front of the same people who watched me fire you. The hall went still. The kind of still that lives only in rooms with concrete floors and high steel ceilings. Wesley rose slowly. He did not let go of Felix's hand. The boy stood beside him, 8 years old, slightly behind his father's shoulder, looking up at the woman on the riser with the steady curiosity of a child who has already made up his mind. Wesley did not speak. He met her eyes. He nodded once. That was all. It was enough. The live stream camera kept recording. The 4-minute clip would be forwarded internally over 1,200 times in the next 48 hours, more than the original. Outside, in the gravel parking lot, Wesley walked Felix to the truck. The boy tugged at his hand. She told the truth, didn't she? Wesley nodded. Then I'll give her the dragon. I finished it last week. Wesley looked down at his son for a long moment. Then he opened the passenger door. Yes. But not today. This weekend, I'm going to invite her to dinner, you can give it to her then. July. 3 months after the apology. Halverson had re-signed Carolina Coastal in May. Lowcountry Shipping had returned in early June. Beacon Maritime, through Wesley as the bridge, had agreed to a 60-40 market share split on the Charleston corridor in exchange for restructured Orion licensing fees. The agreement avoided a multi-year patent dispute and gave Beacon legitimate room to grow. Wesley worked 4 days a week. He left every afternoon at 4 to pick Felix up from the after-school program at Hobcaw Elementary on Whipple Road. He had rebuilt the Orion access protocols from the ground up, adding 3 layers of audit logging that flagged every override in real time to compliance and an outside auditor in Atlanta. He had recruited 2 young engineers from Clemson, one from each of the last 2 graduating classes, and trained them across 8 weeks as his eventual successors. He never said the word permanent. Evelyn changed the way she ran the company. Every Tuesday morning she drove to the North Charleston warehouse without warning, parked in the lot for general staff, and drank coffee in the break room with the foreman. The men who had watched her fire Wesley 10 months earlier had stopped calling her Miss Marsh and started calling her Evelyn. She did not correct them. She and Wesley met one-on-one every Wednesday morning at 8. Black coffee. The week's operational report. They did not discuss anything personal. But the silences between them no longer had the weight of held breath. One Wednesday in mid-July, Felix came along. The school had a teacher workday. He sat in the corner of Evelyn's office in a dinosaur t-shirt with a stack of yellow sticky notes for an hour. When Wesley stepped out into the conference room next door for a call with the Atlanta auditor, Felix walked over to Evelyn's desk. He held out a small yellow paper dragon. "My mom taught my dad how to fold this one. My dad taught me. Now I'm teaching you." Evelyn took the dragon. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the bookshelf behind her desk and set the dragon next to a small paper elephant that had appeared there in May. That Friday night at the pancake place on Coleman, Felix looked across the booth at his father. "Dad. Do you like Miss Evelyn?" Wesley set down his fork. "Why are you asking that?" Felix shrugged. "Because she keeps the dragon and the elephant on her shelf. People who don't like you throw stuff out." Wesley did not answer. He reached across the table and ruffled the boy's hair. Then he flagged the waitress and ordered another side of bacon. The week after, Della stopped by Evelyn's office at the end of the day on Friday. "His 3 months are up next Friday. You need to decide. He won't bring it up himself." Evelyn nodded. That night she sat at her dining table again with a single sheet of plain paper. She wrote the offer in black ink. 3 drafts, all of them short. She finished just before midnight and slid the final into a plain envelope. The last Friday in July. Evelyn drove east across the bridge. She brought an apple pie from Sugar Bake Shop and a small box of cat toys, mouse-shaped, stuffed with catnip. Felix had texted his specifications 3 days earlier through Wesley's phone. The handwritten offer envelope was folded in the inside pocket of her coat. Felix opened the door before she rang the bell. He wore a green dinosaur shirt. He shouted into the house, "She's here." Wesley appeared in the kitchen doorway behind him in a flower-streaked apron, a wooden spoon in one hand. He was smiling. It was the first real smile Evelyn had seen on him. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken. Roasted potatoes with rosemary from the herb pot on the back porch. A green salad. Felix did most of the talking. He described the school's spring science fair, for which he was folding a paper dragon 2 meters long out of butcher paper. Atlas, the gray tabby, slept on the chair Felix had vacated and did not lift his head when Evelyn passed. After dinner, Felix took Evelyn to the back porch and showed her how to fold a paper goldfish from a square of origami paper, gold on one side, white on the other. Wesley stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, watching them. The house no longer felt empty. When Felix had gone up to bed, Wesley and Evelyn sat in the rocking chairs on the front porch. The cicadas were loud. They did not say much for a while. Eventually Evelyn took the envelope from her coat pocket and set it on the small table between them. "I didn't print it. I wrote it by hand because I didn't want it to feel like a legal document." Wesley looked at the envelope but did not pick it up. "I'll stay. But not because of this." She waited. "I'll stay because for the first time in 3 years, my son has someone who looks at him without looking at him with pity. Because you came here tonight not to sign a contract. You came because my son wanted you to come." She did not answer right away. She just nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let them spill. Before she left, Felix came back down the stairs in his pajamas. He had forgotten to give her one last thing. He held out the gold paper goldfish in both palms. You keep it. So you don't forget to come back. Evelyn knelt down to his height. She hugged him quickly and stood. She drove west across the Ravenel in a quiet Charleston night. At the long red light at Meeting Street, she set the goldfish on the dashboard beside the small paper elephant and the yellow paper dragon. The three folded animals caught the green of the traffic light. 10 months earlier, she had fired a man in front of 200 people because she had thought power was the right to stand above everyone else. She understood now that power was knowing when to sit down, accept a glass of lemonade from a child, and let someone teach you how to fold paper. Neither of them had been looking for the other. But somewhere between a paper crane and a dinner that wasn't about business, both had stopped walking away.